Welcome to this Grandma's Life podcast. I'm your host, theciaellis. Get ready to laugh, learn, and grow with me as we explore growing old in an ever-changing world. Today is January 14, 2025, and this is a special edition of the podcast and the fourth episode in a series of Are You Ready for the Next Great Depression? First was episode 48, the introduction. The next was episode 50, How Much Do You Eat? And the third episode was 56, it is called Prepping. I created these episodes in a specific order to give you a good starting point in considering your best way to survive and maybe even thrive in an event of a serious economic downturn, which you can listen to in whatever order you want. This is episode 72. Are you ready for the next Great Depression? Homesteading. Let me start by saying that these episodes are posted on the YouTube channel of this Grandma's Life podcast, and you can also listen to it in audio only on your favorite podcatcher. But I will also be putting this on my Grandma's Homestead YouTube channel in the near future, as I feel this series is important enough that I want this information to reach as many people as possible. We have enjoyed a long period of true prosperity in our country historically, and the thought of being prepared in a very serious economic downturn has never even crossed our minds. Many of us, even during the pandemic, food was readily available in stores, and it may not have been the kind you wanted or something like that, but you could get food. Toilet paper was sometimes scarce, but if you did anything, you could get a little bit there. But food, even then, could be delivered directly to your door, ready to eat. So the thought of not being able to obtain food, to many, is not even close to being on the radar. First, let's go over a little history of a major hurdle that homesteaders and farmers had to overcome during the years of the last Great Depression, in hopes that we could learn something that would help us in a future severe economic downturn. I'm going to read portions of a couple of articles I came across while researching this episode. The first one is The Dust Bowl and the Effects on Farming in the 30s. And this was published in August 15, 2022. The cause of the Dust Bowl includes many factors, starting with the Homestead Act of 1862 and several federal land acts. These laws encouraged people to move westward and to settle on open lands, including those of the Great Plains. Many turned to farming, but without sufficient knowledge of the land or appropriate farming practices, people began plowing under native prairie grass to create room for wheat and other crops. People thought that their agriculture efforts would somehow influence the climate in the area and bring rain to support their farming effort. This belief and Europe's rising demand for wheat during World War I resulted in the plowing of even more acres of prairie grasses to create even more room for crops. Unfortunately, people did not realize the importance of the prairie grass, which had deep roots that held the soil in place. When drought hit, the heat from the sun and lack of water dried out the crops and left the soil susceptible to wind erosion. And this next one is from the National Drought Mitigation Center in the University of Nebraska. Although the 1930s drought was often referred to as if it were one episode, there were at least four distinct drought events: 1930 and 31, 1934, 1936, and then 1939 and 1940. These events occurred in such rapid succession that affected regions were not able to recover adequately before another drought began. Many circumstances exacerbated the effects of the drought, among them the Great Depression and economic overexpansion before the drought, poor land management practices, and the aerial extent and duration of the drought. And aerial does not mean overhead, it was that area. In the early 1920s, farmers saw several opportunities for increasing their production. New technology and crop varieties were reducing the time and cost per acre of farming, which provided great incentive for agriculture expansion. This expansion was also necessary to pay for expensive, newly developed equipment, such as listers and plows, that was often purchased on credit and to offset the low crop prices after World War I. Misleading information, however, was plentiful. Boosters of the region, hoping to promote settlement, put forth glowing but inaccurate accounts of the Great Plains' agricultural potential. In addition to this inaccurate information, most settlers had little money and few other assets, and their farming experience was based on conditions on the more humid eastern United States. So the crops and cultivation practices they chose often were not suitable for the Great Plains. The earliest settlements occurred during a wet cycle, and the first crops flourished, so settlers were encouraged to continue practices that would later have to be abandoned. When droughts and harsh winters inevitably occurred, there was widespread economic hardship and human suffering, but the early settlers put these episodes behind them once the rains returned. Although the 1988 and 89 drought was the most economically devastating natural disaster in the history of the United States, a close second is undoubtedly the series of droughts that affected large portions of the United States in the 1930s. Determining the direct and indirect costs associated with this period of droughts is a difficult task because of the broad impacts of drought, the event's close association with the Great Depression, the fast revival of the economy with the start of World War II, and the lack of adequate economic models for evaluating losses at that time. However, broad calculations and estimates can provide valuable generalizations of the economic impact of the 1930s drought. So let's discuss what we just read. Farming practices were those more adapted to eastern states that have more rain. Plowing prairie grasses for the crops destroy the topsoil. I had read in another book a few years ago that the farmers were also taught to plow straight rows instead of following the contours of the land, making it easier for strong winds to pick up the dry topsoil high into the sky. There were even competitions to see who could plow the straightest rows. The people were lied to. Settlement boosters understated what was actually happening in the region, allowing even more settlers to come in and disrupt the land. The farmers had gone into debt to pay for updated machinery to expand their farming operations and meet the demands of both Americans and Europeans. The poor farming practices, combined with four different droughts in the 30s, culminated in the Great Dust Bowl, a horrific time of dust storms that howled through the region, choking everything in its path. The howling wind whistled through the barely adequate homes of the settlers, sifting dirt through the cracks and coating everything in the homes. The wind gusted, howled, and whistled relentlessly, sometimes causing a person to go insane. There were stories of people who killed themselves to escape the unceasing wind, sometimes after killing everyone in their family. So, why did I tell you this? These people were not of an era that they could not care for themselves. They knew the hardships of settling in a new land and settling and setting up self-sufficient homestead. There were no grocery stores nearby, and certainly no food deliveries that would bring food to your door. Yet the combination of poor farming practices and the years of drought brought terrible disaster to the farmers. Do you see a parallel here? The number one export in the United States right now is topsoil. And I'm not talking about sales. We're not selling the topsoil. We lose so much topsoil in the Gulf of Mexico. There's a huge dead zone throughout most of the year that includes huge amounts of chemical fertilizers, pesticides, and herbicides. The danger of yet another Dust Bowl scenario is very real. If commercial farming is such a danger to the environment, why am I telling you to homestead? If the people of the Dust Bowl in the 30s couldn't hack the conditions, how in the world could we as current residents expect to have a different result? The number one thing you can do is to learn how to protect the topsoil and even learn to build it on your own property. There are a wide variety of ways to grow your own food without pesticides, herbicides, and chemical fertilizers. You can find all kinds of information on techniques and best practices in books and YouTube channels. YouTube University is a real thing. Gaia's Garden and other permaculture and gardening books can guide you on producing food for your family. There are books to teach you how to raise specific animals and even how to process them for your own meat. Learn what the word permaculture means. Learn the practices of what our true organic gardening is. Find out what a swale is and how to incorporate that practice into your homestead. Learn what companion planting is and how to implement it in your garden. Learn how to compost. Learn how to save the water that when it rains so you can have it when it doesn't. If you are using a variety of these practices on your property to grow your own food, the dead zones of traditional farmers around you will not likely affect your homestead as much. The rain that does fall is put to proper use and not wasted. The compost you learn to cultivate helps to build your own healthy soil. To help build the topsoil on your property, put animals on it. Chickens are a very good start as they search for bugs to eat and poop, creating a natural fertilizer. The water that your ducks have played in all day is good for your land, another natural fertilizer. Add animals as you are comfortable. First, learning the impact that animals will have on your land. What animals does your land need? What do you eat, and what animals will provide that food? Not every homestead needs a milk cow. Goats and even sheep can provide fresh milk for your family should you decide to go that route. A homestead can provide a natural, local source of food to feed your family year round as you learn how not only to grow your own food, but also to preserve the food that you've worked so hard to produce. Preserving the harvest will be in a future podcast. So, how much of a homestead do you need? Even this consideration can be difficult to pinpoint. What are your nutritional needs? Is your family more carnivore diet or vegetarian? Because most households families, your dietary needs will probably cover a wide variety of food groups. How much rain does your area receive? How cold does it get? How hot? What kind of soil is on your property? As you learn to care for your land and the soil, it will increase nutrients over time, but you still need a starting point. The size of a homestead can vary depending on a homesteader's goals and the terrain. And this part that I'm reading now is something I Googled on homestead sizes. 2 to 4 acres can support a small family if managed well. 5 acres, a 5 acre tract of 660 foot long and 330 foot wide. 11 to 30 acres, a medium sized homestead that can accommodate multiple dwellings, large gardens, and timber for lumber or for firewood. 20 to 40 acres, a larger homestead that can provide more self sufficiency with room for orchards, ponds, poultry, and livestock. When choosing a homestead, you can consider family size, whether you have a large or small family. Animals. What animals do you want to raise, such as chickens, turkeys, ducks, geese, rabbits, pigs, cows, or sheep? The terrain, whether the land is all pasture, mostly forest, or by water. Maintenance, whether you can manage the land if you have health problems or if you're in your 80s. So don't go in all at once. Start as soon as possible to get to your land. Choose carefully the location you wish to settle. Is it raw land? I mean, is there water is there a water source? Will you have electricity? Will you need building permits for the infrastructure you desire for your house to house your desired animals? These are just a few of the things you will need to consider when making decisions for your homestead. Homesteading is definitely a lifestyle choice. After you get on the land, get the obligatory chickens and learn how to take care of them. Then move on to another animal. A good rule of thumb is to take one type of animal a year. This gives you time to learn how to take care of that animal, to breed it if desired, to keep it safe from predators, to keep it from dying in the numerous ways that animals seem to have a talent for doing. Unfortunately, deaths are part of homestead life. Homesteading is hard work. Regardless if you're sick with the flu, it's raining heavily, or it's 20 below zero outside, the animals need to be fed, watered, and cared for. There will be days when you just want to quit. At the same time, however, homesteading is very rewarding. The first time you serve a meal that has even one ingredient that you grew yourself, you feel a sense of pride in this small accomplishment. When you have a meal with multiple ingredients that you grew yourself, where every dish served has your homegrown tomatoes, bacon, green beans, or whatever else, you will have that feeling that maybe you can take care of yourself regardless of what's going on in the rest of the world. There's so much more to cover, but this is a good start. I will have more episodes in the future to help you prepare for the next Great Depression should it happen. All right. I would encourage you to check out my Etsy shop. It's scriptureskits.etsy.com. It has a skit for Easter or Resurrection Sunday in it. I have other skits that I'm going to be putting into it. Most of those will be for basically between two women for women's groups and stuff. But scripture skits at .etsy.com. I would appreciate it if you tell others about this podcast and give me a 5-star review. And also check out those other episodes I was talking about for the preparing for the next Great Depression. Where I can be found. I have a Farm Animal Life YouTube channel. It's a channel that all I do is put a camera in either into a brooder or someplace like that. There's no storyline. There's no talking in it. It's just a camera showing the antics of baby chicks or baby ducks or whatever I put the camera in. My website is grandmahomestead.farm. I have a Grandma's Homestead YouTube channel. If you're listening to the podcast, Kenzie Lackey Sports YouTube channel. I'm on Instagram, TikTok, X, and Rumble under some form of Thecia E or Thecia Ellis. I'm on Facebook as Thecia V. Dayhoff Ellis, but I also now have a Grandma's Homestead Facebook page. That's all I got for you guys. I pray that this is helping you to get a little bit of a thought to what you can do, regardless of what's happening in the world, regardless of who's in office, whatever is happening is, like I've said, we've gone through a significant period of time of food readily available to us, and it might not come down to that again. So consider it, think about what you can be doing. And until then, live until you die. God bless, guys. I'll see you next time.